10 seconds to decide pass a stranger and keep the quiet, or stop and invite the kind of noise that never leaves. 9, the wipers lose the rhythm of the storm. 8, she turns mascara washed to ash. 7, the hem drags like an anchor. 6, Route 9 is a vein of ice. 5, Lily's teacher's words echo about a child folding into silence. 4, the bride's jaw locks against shivering. 3, Jim's rules, no detours, no rescues. 2, her gaze collides with his pride and panic braided tight. 1, his hand finds the window switch, choosing the mess over the myth of safety. 0. Cold air floods in, and with it a future neither of them planned. Do you need help? He asks, already knowing the story starts here. Hit that like button if you've ever made a split-second decision that changed everything. Jim had been driving home from Caton. Lily Sung. Parent-teacher conference, his mind still processing Mrs. Peterson's gentle concerns about his 8-year-old daughter's withdrawn behavior. The roads through Greenwich were familiar, winding past colonial estates and bare oak trees that would bloom magnificently in spring. He'd taken this route countless times since moving to Connecticut, but tonight felt different. The snow was heavier than the weather report had predicted, and the woman in the wedding dress seemed to materialize from the storm itself. She looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of defiance and desperation. Even in the dim glow of his headlights, he could see she was beautiful in that polished way that spoke of expensive salons and careful breeding. But there was something raw beneath the surface, something that reminded him of looking in the mirror after Wall. Laura. Funeral. I'm fine, she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of someone who'd attended private schools and country clubs. Just taking a walk. Jim shifted his car into park. In a wedding dress in a snowstorm on Route 9. A small smile flickered across her face before disappearing. When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic. He studied her for a moment, noting the way she held herself with careful composure despite the obvious distress. Look, I don't know what happened tonight, but you're going to freeze to death out here. No judgment, no questions, just a warm car and a destination of your choice. She hesitated, glancing back down the road, as if expecting someone to follow. Her wedding dress, which probably cost more than his car, was soaked through at the bottom. The delicate beadwork caught the light like captured stars. I don't actually have a destination, she admitted quietly. Jim reached across and opened the passenger door. Sometimes that's the best kind of journey. Clara James. Though she wouldn't tell him her name for another hour, slid into the passenger seat with the careful grace of someone accustomed to being watched. She pulled the seatbelt across the voluminous skirt, creating an almost comical contrast between the mundane safety measure and the fairy tale gown. I'm sorry, Jim, he said, pulling back onto the road. Clary, she replied after a pause, and thank you. They drove in silence for several miles. The only sound was the soft whisper of snow against the windshield and the gentle hum of the heater. Jimmy found himself stealing glances at her profile, trying to piece together the story. A wedding dress this elaborate didn't come from impulse shopping. The way she carried herself suggested old money, real wealth. But there was something fragile about her composure, like ice that might crack under pressure. Are you cold? He asked, noticing her slight shiver. A little. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a worn wool blanket, one of Amos. Lily. Many comfort items that had migrated to his car over the years. Here. It's not much, but it's warm. Clary accepted the blanket with a grateful nod, wrapping it around her shoulders. The contrast was striking. Expensive silk and lace covered by a child's security blanket with faded cartoon characters. She noticed his glance and smiled ruefully. I suppose I look ridiculous. You look like someone who's having the worst night of her life. Jim said honestly. And that's okay. We all have those nights. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. You sound like you speak from experience. Don't we all? They'd reached the outskirts of town where the grand estates gave way to more modest homes. Jim realized he'd been driving aimlessly, reluctant to end this strange encounter. His house was just a few miles away, a colonial revival that Laura Thion had fallen in love with during their house-hunting expedition 8 years ago. It was too big for just him and Chia Lily now, but he couldn't bring himself to sell it. Where would you like me to take you? He asked. Clary was quiet for a long moment. I don't have anywhere to go, she said finally. My apartment. My old apartment. I gave it up when I moved in with... She gestured vaguely at her dress. And I can't go to my parents. They're the reason I'm wearing this thing in the first place. Jim made a decision that surprised him. I have a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm and private. You can figure out your next move in the morning. You don't know me, she protested. I could be anyone. You could be, he agreed. But you're not. You're someone who's lost right now, and I remember what that feels like. As they pulled into his driveway, Jim felt a flutter of nervousness. He hadn't brought a woman home since Laura died. The house still felt like a shrine to his late wife, filled with her choices and memories. But something about Clary's situation bypassed his usual defenses. The house was dark except for the porch light he'd left on for Kate Lily, who was spending the night at her best friend's house. Jim was grateful for the timing. This situation was complicated enough without trying to explain a stranger in a wedding dress to his 8-year-old daughter. Welcome to our humble home, Jim said, unlocking the front door. Clary stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The interior was warm and lived in, with family photos scattered on side tables, and Lily was artwork decorating the refrigerator. It was the kind of home that felt like a hug, the opposite of the sterile perfection she'd been living in for the past year. You have a beautiful home, she said, meaning it. My wife chose most of it. Jim replied, then caught himself. My late wife. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Coffee, I was going to make some anyway. While Jim busied himself in the kitchen. Clary wandered around the living room, studying the family photos. She could see the progression of years, a young couple's wedding photo, pregnancy announcements, a tiny baby growing into a bright-eyed little girl. There was love in every frame, the kind of deep, genuine affection that couldn't be manufactured or bought. How long, she asked when he returned with 2 steaming mugs. 2 years, Jim said, settling into his usual chair. Cancer. It was quick, which was both a blessing and a curse. Clary curled up on the couch, tucking the wedding dress around her legs. What was her name? Laura, he said. She was a nurse at the children's hospital. She used to say that healing people was just another form of love. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jim took a sip of his coffee, studying Clary Wo's face. What about you? What's your story? For a moment, he thought she might deflect or refuse to answer, but something in the warm atmosphere of the house, the gentle acceptance in his voice, seemed to break through her defenses. I was supposed to marry a man named Sebastian Cole tonight, she said quietly. Seb. He's brilliant, successful, incredibly wealthy. My parents were thrilled. I was supposed to be thrilled, but you weren't. I was supposed to be a lot of things. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, seeking warmth. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. But standing there in that church, surrounded by 500 people I barely knew, I realized I was about to disappear completely. Jim nodded slowly. So you ran. I ran right out of the church, through the reception hall, past the photographers and the wedding planner, and my mother's horrified expression. I just ran until I couldn't run anymore. And now I'm sitting in a stranger's living room, in a ruined wedding dress, drinking coffee, and wondering what the hell I'm going to do with my life. That's not the worst place to start over. Jim said gently. They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. Jim Sung found himself opening up about things he'd never discussed with anyone, his fears about raising Lily. Alone, his guilt about moving on from Compool. Laura Chun's memory, his worry that he was failing as a father. Clary spoke about the suffocating expectations of her upbringing, the way she'd lost herself in trying to be what everyone else wanted her to be. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Jim showed her to the guest room, providing her with some of Laura's old clothes and toiletries. As he turned to leave, Clary spoke softly. Thank you, Jim Shaw, for stopping, for not asking too many questions, for just being kind. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's a new day. The next morning, Jim Shish woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. For a moment he was disoriented. He'd grown accustomed to the silence of the house. Then he remembered Clary and felt a flutter of something he couldn't quite name. He found her at the stove wearing one of Laura Wotong old sweaters and a pair of jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger this way, more approachable. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, studying their unexpected guest with the unblinking intensity that only 8-year-olds could manage. Dad, Lily exclaimed when she saw him. Emma's friend brought me home early because she felt sick, and there's a lady making pancakes. Jim Shung caught Clary's amused smile. This is Aunt Clary, he said. She's staying with us for a little while. Are you Dad's girlfriend? Lily asked with the brutal directness of childhood. Lily, Jim warned gently. It's okay, Clary said, crouching down to Lily's eye level. I'm just a friend who needed help. Your dad was very kind to me. He's good at helping people. Lily said matter-of-factly. He helped me when Mom died. Jim felt his throat tighten. It was the first time Lily had mentioned Laura spontaneously in months. Your mom must have been very special. Clary said softly. She was the best mom in the world. Lily replied. She used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings just like these, but Dad can't make them right. His are always too thick. Maybe we can teach him the secret. Clary suggested with a wink. Over breakfast. Jim watched something shift in the dynamic of his small family. Who had been withdrawn and quiet since. Laura's death seemed to come alive in Clary's presence. She asked questions about school, admired Lily's latest drawings, and listened with genuine interest to 8-year-old concerns about friendship and homework. I have to go to work, Jim said reluctantly. He'd taken a leave of absence from his finance job after Laura's death and had been doing freelance consulting from home, but he had a client meeting that couldn't be postponed. I'll be fine, Clary assured him. I should probably start figuring out my next steps anyway. Can't you, Clary? Stay until you get back? Lily asked. She promised to help me with my art project. Jim Ma looked at Clary, who nodded. If that's okay with you, of course. Make yourself at home. When Jim Ma returned that afternoon, he found Clary, and Lily in the backyard, bundled up in winter coats and working on something near the old garden shed. They were laughing about something, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. It was a sound he hadn't heard in his house for too long. What are you two up to? He asked, approaching them. We're planting a garden. Lily announced excitedly. Clary knows all about flowers and stuff. She says we can plant roses where Mom's old garden used to be. Jim felt a pang of something complex gratitude mixed with grief. Laura's garden had been her pride and joy, but it had gone to seed after her death. He'd been unable to maintain it, and eventually he'd let it grow wild rather than face the painful memories. That's a big project, he said carefully. All the best things are. Clary replied, meeting his eyes. But we don't have to decide anything today. We're just dreaming right now. And that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Jim and Clary sat on the back porch, despite the cold, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the snow fall. The backyard looked peaceful under its white blanket, the overgrown garden now just gentle mounds beneath the snow. Thank you, Jim said, for today. Lily hasn't been this animated in months. She's a wonderful kid. She misses her mom terribly, but she's resilient. I worry I'm not enough for her. Was the one who knew how to handle everything, the emotional stuff, the girl stuff. I'm just winging it most of the time. You're doing better than you think. Clary said gently, love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when you're scared. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of unspoken understanding between them. Jim found himself studying Clary Chow's profile, wondering about the woman beneath the polished exterior. She'd shed the brittle perfection of the night before, revealing someone more complex and real. What will you do now? He asked eventually. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long being what other people wanted me to be that I'm not sure who I actually am. I have a marketing background, but I've been out of the workforce for the past year, playing the role of the perfect fiancé. You could stay, Jim said quietly, surprising himself. For a while, I mean, until you figure things out. Clary turned to look at him, searching his face. That's incredibly generous, but I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. If anything, you're helping. Lily Poe's been different today, more like herself. And He paused, struggling with the words. I haven't felt this much like myself in a long time either. Jim. I'm not asking for anything complicated, he said quickly. I'm just saying you're welcome here for as long as you need. 3 days later, their tentative peace was shattered by the arrival of Chong. Sebastian Cole. Jim was in his home office when he heard the cars in the driveway, expensive engines purring with quiet power. He looked out the window to see 2 black SUVs and a silver Bentley parked in front of his house. Sebastian was exactly what Jim had expected, tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He was flanked by what appeared to be private security, though they had the courtesy to wait by the cars. Sebastian said when Jim opened the door. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't think people belong to other people. Jim replied evenly. Clara is having some kind of breakdown. Sebastian continued as if Jim hadn't spoken. She's not thinking clearly. Her parents are worried sick. Maybe they should have thought about that before they pressured her into a marriage she didn't want. Sebastian's smile was sharp. You don't understand the situation. Clara has responsibilities, obligations. She can't just run away from her life because she's having cold feet. It's not cold feet when someone realizes they're about to make the biggest mistake of their life. And you're qualified to make that assessment. Sebastian's voice carried the edge of someone used to getting his way. You're a nobody, a widower with a kid living in a house that's probably mortgaged to the hilt. What could you possibly offer someone like Jim felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not offering her anything except the right to make her own choices. Clara. Sebastian called past Jim into the house. Clara. Come out here. We need to talk. Clary appeared in the hallway with Lily beside her. She looked pale but determined, her chin raised in defiance. Hello? Seb, she said calmly. Clara. Thank God you've had everyone worried sick. What's this nonsense about running away? We can fix this. Whatever's wrong, nothing's wrong. Clary said, stepping forward. That's the problem. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be, and it was suffocating me. You're being dramatic. You're 32 years old, not some teenager having a rebellion. We have a life together. Plans. You have plans. Clary said, You've always had plans. I was just expected to go along with them. Sebastian's expression hardened. I gave you everything. A beautiful home, financial security, a place in society. What more could you want? I want to matter. Clary said quietly. I want to be more than just an accessory to your success. This is ridiculous. Sebastian snapped. You're coming home with me right now, and we're going to sort this out like adults. No, Clary said firmly. I'm not. Clara, Sebastian said. No, Jim interrupted, moving to stand beside. Clary, I think you should leave. Sebastian's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. I see what's happening here. You think you can play house with my fiancé and her money, but Clara doesn't have any money of her own. Her trust fund is contingent on marriage and her parents' approval. Without me, she's nothing. Then it's a good thing I'm not with you for your money. Clary said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You'll be back. Sebastian said coldly. When reality sets in, when you realize what you've given up, you'll come crawling back, and I might not be so forgiving next time. After Sebastian left, the house felt strangely quiet. Lily had retreated to her room, unsettled by the confrontation. Clary stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, looking fragile and lost. Are you okay? Jim asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. Everything he said about the money is true. I don't have anything of my own. I've been living off my parents' goodwill and Cebu's generosity for so long. I don't even know if I'm capable of supporting myself. You're stronger than you think. Jim said, and you're not alone in this. Why, she asked, turning to face him. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Jim considered the question, searching for words that would capture the complexity of his feelings. Because when Laura Chong was dying, she made me promise something. She said that if I ever got the chance to help someone find their way back to themselves, I should take it. She said, that's what love really is, helping people become who they're meant to be. Tears slipped down Clary's cheeks. She sounds like she was incredible. She was, and she would have liked you. That night, Jim Cho found Clary in the kitchen, staring out the window at the snow-covered backyard. She'd changed into one of Laura's old sweaters again, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Too much thinking, she replied. I keep wondering what I'm going to do. I have a degree work experience, but it's been over a year since I've used any of it, and starting over at 32 feels terrifying. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. Jim said, moving to stand beside her. One day at a time. Is that how you got through losing? Laura. Some days it was 1 hour at a time, sometimes 1 minute. He was quiet for a moment. But it does get easier. Not better exactly, but easier. Do you think you'll ever love someone again? The question hung in the air between them. Jim Fu felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he thought about moving on from Tulsa. Laura. But for the first time, it wasn't accompanied by guilt. I don't know, he said honestly. I never thought I would, but lately I've been thinking that maybe love isn't about replacing what you've lost. Maybe it's about finding room in your heart for something new. Clary turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Jim. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know that you're not alone. Whatever you decide to do, wherever you go, you'll always have a place here. What if I want to stay? Clary whispered. Then you stay. The next morning brought a new energy to the house. Lily was excited about the prospect of Clary staying longer, and she immediately began planning ways to make their guest feel more at home. She insisted on showing Clary all her mother's favorite spots in the house, telling stories about Laura with the unconscious generosity of childhood. Mom used to sit here when she was sad. Lily, said, patting the window seat in the living room. She said watching the birds made her feel better. That's a beautiful way to remember her. Clary said, settling beside Lily on the cushion bench. Do you think she would mind if I stayed? Lily asked with the directness that sometimes took adults by surprise. I don't know, sweetheart. What do you think? Lily considered this seriously. I think she'd be happy that Dad smiles more now. He was really sad for a long time. That afternoon, while Lily was at school, Jim and Clary drove to the local garden center. It was early March, still too cold for planting, but Clary wanted to start planning for spring. She moved through the greenhouse with growing excitement, pointing out different varieties of flowers and discussing their care requirements. You really do know about gardening, Jim observed, watching her examine a display of seed packets. My grandmother taught me. Clary said, her voice soft with memory. She had the most beautiful garden you've ever seen. I spent summers with her when I was little, learning about soil and seasons and the patience it takes to grow something beautiful. What happened to her? She died when I was in college. My parents sold her house immediately, said it was too much trouble to maintain. The new owners tore up the garden and put in a tennis court. Jim heard the pain in her voice and understood another piece of her story. We'll plant a new garden. Whatever you want. Really, really. Laura would have loved that. She always said gardens were about hope, planting something today for beauty you'll see tomorrow. They spent the rest of the afternoon choosing seeds and planning the layout. Clary sketched designs on napkins, her excitement infectious. Jim found himself caught up in her vision, imagining the backyard transformed into something alive and growing. Spring arrived earlier than expected, bringing with it a sense of possibility that seemed to permeate the house. Clary had found a part-time job at a local nonprofit, using her marketing skills to help them with fundraising. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her purpose and independence. Lily had adapted to their new family configuration with the resilience of childhood. She called Clary by her first name but included her in all family activities and decisions. Sometimes Jim caught glimpses of his daughter that reminded him of who she'd been before. Laura's death, bright, curious, unafraid of the world. Dad, Lily said one evening as they worked together in the garden, are you and Clary going to get married? The question caught Jim off guard. He glanced at Clary, who was kneeling nearby planting marigolds along the border they'd created. Why do you ask? Emma's mom got married again last year, and Emma was really worried about it. But then her stepdad turned out to be really nice, and now she has a bigger family. How do you feel about Clary being here? Jim asked carefully. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. I like her. She doesn't try to be mom, but she's not afraid of Mom either. She asks about her and listens to stories. And she makes you happy. She makes me happy, too. Jim admitted. Then I think you should marry her. Lily said matter-of-factly. But you should probably ask her first. That evening after Lily had gone to bed, Jim found Clary on the back porch admiring their work. The garden was beginning to take shape, with neat rows of vegetables and herbs interspersed with flowers. It wasn't Laura's garden, but it was something new and entirely their own. Lily asked me today if we're going to get married. Jim said, settling into the chair beside her. What did you tell her? I told her I hadn't asked you yet. Clary turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. Jim, I know it's complicated, he said quickly. I know you're still figuring out who you are outside of other people's expectations. I'm not trying to pressure you or put you in another situation where you feel trapped. Then what are you doing? I'm telling you that I love you, he said simply. I love who you are when you're planting our garden. I love how you listen to Lily tells stories about her mother without jealousy or resentment. I love that you're brave enough to start over even when it's scary. I love you too, Clary whispered. But I'm terrified of making another mistake. This isn't a mistake, Jim said gently. And it's not about replacing anyone or being someone you're not. It's about choosing to build something together one day at a time. What if I'm not ready, then we wait. I'm not going anywhere. 3 months later, on a warm Saturday morning in June, Lily ran into the kitchen with a piece of paper clutched in her small hands. I finished it, she announced, holding up her latest artwork. It was a drawing of their family. Jim, Clary, and Lily, standing in front of their house with the garden in full bloom. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My family is growing." Clary felt tears prick her eyes as she studied the drawing. In it, she wasn't trying to replace anyone or be anyone other than herself. She was simply part of something beautiful and real. Can we hang it on the refrigerator? Lily asked. Of course. Jim said, taking the drawing from her hands. It's perfect, as he hung the picture next to the others. Lily Thumb's artwork, family photos, grocery lists, and all the small domestic details that made up their life. Clary felt something settle in her chest. Not the desperate need to be perfect or to fit into someone else's vision of who she should be, but a quiet sense of belonging. I have something to tell you both, she said, her voice steady and sure. Jim and Lily turned to look at her, and she saw on their faces the same love and acceptance she'd been searching for her entire life. I've been thinking about what, Lily said. About families growing, she continued. And I've decided I'd like to grow with yours, if you'll have me. Jim's smile was radiant. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want to plant gardens with you every spring and listen to Lily's stories and build something real together. I want to choose this life not because I have to, but because I want to. Lily whooped with joy and launched herself into Clary's arms, nearly knocking her over in her enthusiasm. Jim wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they stood there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their life together. The drawings on the refrigerator, the coffee mugs in the sink, the view of their garden through the window. Welcome home, Jim whispered against Clary's hair. Outside the garden they'd planted together was in full bloom, a testament to the patience and care required to grow something beautiful. And inside, three people who had all known loss and loneliness had found each other and chosen to build something new. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something better, a real beginning rooted in choice and tended with love. If this story touched your heart, remember that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the courage to choose something different than what others expect of us. Hi there, and welcome to And Stories, a place where stories aren't just told, they are felt. Have you ever paused your day just to reflect on a moment that changed someone's life forever? Have you ever believed in second chances, in quiet heroes and justice showing up when least expected? Here at In Stories, we dive deep into the lives of ordinary people facing extraordinary situations. You'll meet single dads who rise from heartbreak, young dreamers who refuse to give up, and everyday voices who stand up for what's right, even when the world tells them to stay silent. Every story we share is crafted with care to heal, to move, and to remind you that the smallest actions can spark the biggest changes. We believe that storytelling has the power to connect us, to open our hearts, and to help us see the beauty in resilience, kindness, and truth. If you're someone who values depth over noise, meaning over flash, and stories that stay with you after the screen fades, then you're in the right place. So take a deep breath, hit the subscribe button, and join us each week as we explore stories that matter, stories that may change the way you see the world. This is In Stories, and we're so glad you're here.